A big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video.
In this video, what I want to do is talk all about foregrounds and how you can use foregrounds in your wide angle photography to really create some amazing images. Morning everybody, fantastic to see you all again. So I'm back home now. I've just been in Norway, in Lofoten, and we saw some amazing vistas and we took some amazing shots. But what was particularly of interest with the foregrounds, there was amazing snow patterns because we'd had heavy snowfall. And a lot of the photography we did was about finding these snow patterns and including them in the big vista shot with wide angle lenses. And I thought it'd be really good to show you some shots that I got from there and other locations as well, and talk about what I do to go about shooting powerful foregrounds and how I go about finding those powerful foregrounds as well. Talk about the camera settings, how I set it up, sort of certain angles as well. So let's go back to the studio and we can have a look at some prints. Come on, Pebbles. What can you see? So I'm back in my studio now with Pebbles, who's quite muddy actually. Oh, Pebbles, what have you done? Anyway, foregrounds and creating powerful foregrounds. It's something, as I just said, that is so exciting to do, and if you get it right, can look amazing like these photos here. And I've just come back from Norway where we had this incredible snow, and that snow and the wind create these really nice patterns. So we spent quite a lot of time shooting the foregrounds, and I thought it'd be a really good time to do this video. I've been thinking about it for a while, but now I've got these photos to show you from Norway and obviously some of my other photos. I can tell you about how I go about creating powerful foregrounds. So before I get started, let's get started by talking about the gear. I don't talk about gear much, but I think it's important just to mention what I use. So I tend to use ultra wide lens. So this one's a 14 to 30, and I use it between about 14 and 18 millimeters. And when I'm shooting, I tend to be shooting not like that, but tend to be like that. Or if I'm shooting in landscape, then tend to be like that. So what I want to do is actually make the foreground the star of the show. Even if the background looks absolutely amazing, I want to make that foreground look really, really stunning. So it's really important to choose the right foreground. And trust me, I've done it wrong so many times, and I still do it wrong a lot of times as well. But I think I've found some types of foreground that work better than others. So I just wanted to go through those with you today in this video and explain how you can use them in composition. So the first one, and I'll also show some examples of what doesn't work as well as what does work. Let's have a look at the first one, and that is simple foregrounds. So really simple foregrounds, usually leading lines, but it can be just other simple foregrounds as well. And I tend to be a little bit further away. So in most of my foregrounds, I'm usually stood up. In all these, I've probably been stood up when I've taken it and pointing the camera down. In a type of foreground that I'll talk about later, I usually get a little bit closer to it. But in these, I'm around about eye height or maybe chest height. So you can see here, we've got a really amazing leading line, and the foreground's a good half of the image in this one, and all I've done is just create something very simple in the foreground. I've even blurred the water to create an even more simple foreground. And what I'm doing, the reason that I like those simple foregrounds is, and I've spoken about this before in a wide angle video, that bottom part of your photo is really important. That's where the viewer usually goes into your photo and then works its way up. Again, this is a good example here. This was the first morning in Norway. It was so amazing. We'd had all this snow, and this is the beach, believe it or not. And we went down to this beach, we had these amazing clouds, and we managed to capture some really great shots before anybody else had come along and put their footprints down. So this is a super simple foreground. There is a leading line there as well. There's some patterns, but it's super, super simple. The bottom half of this image is not much to it, but what it means is it leads you into the other image and it creates more drama in your shot. If you just had that top part of the image and not the foreground, the drama would be lessened. So So that's a good example there. Another one back at Stockness in Iceland, and if you haven't been to there, then oh my word, that is just got to be my favourite place to shoot. There are so many different options and compositions, and those mountains just really set it off. But what I tried to do here was create a very simple foreground. There were some patterns in the snow, it had frozen the night before, and I wanted to use that foreground in a very simplistic way. And again, in this one, which was in Switzerland, the foreground's just the light just casting a shadow and creating that texture on the snow. So they're the easiest to do, I think, those simple foregrounds, because you've just got to find something that's simple. And just when I'm talking about simple foregrounds, it's probably best now to talk about repeating foregrounds. So repeating foregrounds is where you're using repeating patterns in the foreground to accentuate the texture or the thing that you're photographing. But it's not just one thing. It's not like a rock or a crack in the ice or something like that. So this first one is one of my favourites from Scotland from 2 or 3 years ago now, of these grasses. I really liked how they sort of look like valleys. And if you want to look on a video on how I took that, I'll link it here. Another one is these stones. So here in these stones in the foreground, it's just repeating. Your eye doesn't get stuck there, it sort of goes up. It's a little bit like the simplistic ones. And then again, these grasses in this lock here, you know, it's quite a dull day. So what I wanted to do is create contrast by having the grasses against the dark water. And that really simple pattern of grasses takes your eye through and up into the image. So they're the simple things. They're the things that are fairly easy to do in terms of your foreground using an ultra wide angle lens like this. But what about doing something where you've got a really definite object or a rock or some cracked ice or something where you want to make it the superstar of the show? You know, that's the thing that you're photographing, and the background mountains are just the secondary part to it. Well, this is the type of foreground that I really, really like, but I have to admit I'm not successful all the time. And there's a few key elements to creating foregrounds a bit like this one here in the Faroe Islands of these flowers. And what you've got to do is, first of all, find an element on the ground that you want to take a photo of. And quite honestly, it doesn't have to be that big, because when you get closer to it, so when you're pointing your lens and you're pointing it down and you get closer to it, then you're making that, you know, at the star of the show. Now, you will have to focus stack it, because you might only be sort of this far away from it. So you have to focus on that and focus on the mountains. And I did a video on focus stacking that you can see here. There's also, quick plug, a video all about the, focus stacking and focus in my masterclass, the link in the description. So what you're trying to do is get really close to it and really make that the star, and then make sure you're quite close to something that's quite dominant in the background, like mountains or a sunset, or, you know, can't be close to a sunset, but there's something also that can counteract that really strong foreground in the background. So this is a good example here from Norway. We found this ice that had cracked, so the tide goes out, the ice drops, and then it sort of cracks around, and I felt this looked like an eye of a dragon or something that was maybe asleep in the snow. So I got really close to it. You can see in the video here, I was super close to it with my tripod. And then what I did was point down on it, and what was only very small on the ground, when I got close to it, became very dominant in the frame, and you can see it's 2/3 of the frame. Now in this particular image, probably not the best, because I didn't get the light on the mountain in the background, and I really wanted that to balance the image a little bit better. You can see I've got another one here from the Lake District where the foreground was just these sort of grasses that had this dew on it. And that works quite well. It leads through from the foreground to the distant trees and the hills in the mist in the background. Now, to make these work, to make this foreground work, you've got to try and find something that's quite well isolated. You can see in all three of those, the element that I'm taking in the foreground is quite well isolated. If you don't do that, so if you look at these here, where I've got some rocks or some grasses, and they get lost in the foreground, they don't really look great, and it becomes just a foreground rather than a very powerful foreground. And it's just an average shot then, rather than something that's a little bit more special. Again, even on this one with this amazing light, my foreground wasn't that strong. It was some grasses that were catching the light okay, but there was nothing very dominant in the foreground. It's an okay shot, but it's not super powerful. Whereas if you take something like this one here from Lofoten, then I got really close to these rocks, pointing my camera right down on the rocks. And because I was quite close to the houses and the big mountains in Lofoten in the background, they're still not diminished to nothing. But these rocks with these barnacles on look super special. And because we had flat light, it means that everything just ties together a little bit better. You know, again, this one with Pebbles, these rocks I was really close to, and then Pebbles connects me to the distance because she's looking out into the distance. Whereas this one that I took in the Lake District isn't so good because the ice is just a bit wishy-washy. It's nothing that's really special, and that's what you're looking for with a powerful foreground. So here's another couple, one from Lofoten. We'd waited until the light was just right. We're getting some amazing reflected light onto the snow, which you often get in snow because it sort of catches the colours of the sky. And you can see that colour, that sort of orange colour in the sky is being reflected into the snow. And then we've got this beautiful pattern in the snow. And what I've tried to do is just create it very simple. So I've tried to isolate any rocks or any distractions just to make your eye focus on that really nice curve in the pattern at the bottom. And once again, on this one here with the fern, it's all about the fern being in the foreground, and there's no other distracting elements to it. You know, there's bluebells there, but they're quite even and uniform around it. So I just want to finish on another important element with foregrounds, is just how you connect those foregrounds to the distance. And that, a lot of that has to do with how high up you are. So you imagine that, you know, the higher up you are with your camera, the more mid-ground you're going to get in. If you point down, the lower you go, the less mid-ground you're going to get, because that viewing angle to the mid-ground is going to be diminished and go lower. So it's important to think about that when you're taking your shot, because you don't want it just to be a photo of some foreground and then a photo of a mountain in the background. A little bit like this one here. It's quite a nice shot. I was struggling a little bit with the light and the shade, but I don't have anything that connects this quite nice foreground to the distant mountain. And I tried all sorts of different angles, and I don't think it's a really bad shot, but it just doesn't connect the two things together very well. Obviously they're both snowy, but I'd like something to lead me through to that mountain in the background. Whereas this one's starting to do it a little bit better, but not quite there. I've got some nice foreground, this rock and the water create this quite simplistic foreground, and your eye goes through, but then it doesn't really connect to the mountain. I need another waterfall in the mountain or something. So although I like this shot, it's not perfect. It's not exactly what I need. Again, this one here, I'm starting to do it a little bit better. So I've got some slate in the foreground, which is quite nice, powerful. It's got some nice textures, and then it leads me through the midground to this hut that's made of the slate. So you can see that that's connecting together and then out to the distant mountains. I think I probably need to revisit that and try and get a slightly better angle where the slate goes past the hut, and then that connects me to the distant hills. But yeah, that's getting closer. But then these are much better. So this one here, I've got these rocks in the foreground and it's connected through to the distance. And that looks really good. I really like that. It really works. You know, your eye just goes through, and also the sky colour is reflected in the tones of the rock in the Lake District. I love taking these types of rocks in the Lake District. We've got them everywhere and they just look so good. I get really excited when I go out in the shade often, you know, where you've got sort of really flat light and you can try and find some nice foregrounds like this. So I hope that's helped. I hope that's allowed you to go out and maybe think, I'm going to go and shoot some foregrounds. I'll just leave you the top tip, which is handhold. Just go out and handhold. Don't worry too much about getting everything focused to begin with. You know, eventually you probably do want to put it on a tripod and do some focus stacking, but just go out, leave your tripod at home, handhold, and then you can get into the positions that are going to create those best shots. I mean, I went out with my phone this morning with pebbles, and just by moving down with my phone, just look at the difference it made to the shot that where I was stood at eye height when I went down to about this far off the ground. It makes such a big difference moving around 1 or 2 meters. So try that, and yeah, good luck. I wanted to mention Squarespace, who are the sponsor of this video. That they've supported me so much, and you know, I say this a lot, but they help me more than ever when I've got something that's been that I've just released. So I've currently released my Vistas book. If you haven't got a copy, then you can go and check it out on my website. But what's so good about Squarespace is it means that I can manage that. It gives me all the information. It takes all the credit card details or PayPal, and then it puts it all in one place, and I can download a spreadsheet, or I can email out the people, the 100 people that bought the book with a print. I can email them and say, which of these prints would you like? I can just do that all through Squarespace, and that makes my life so much easier. So if you're looking for a website, then you can go to squarespace.com, and then if you're ready to go forward for it and use your site, then you can get 10% off with the offer code Nigel or /Nigel. Anyway, good luck with that. Good luck with your foregrounds. And until next Sunday, bye.
If we fail, we just reboot. We just reboot.